Apple TV Plus gets a mention at the Worldwide Developer Conference keynote. This is TV Plus Talk on MacVoices. This is TV Plus Talk. I'm Chuck Joyner, and she is...
I'm Charlotte Henry. Hello again.
It's good to see you, Charlotte, as always.
I'm pleased. I feel like we say this every month now, but there's so much happening in TV Plus land.
There is. But before we get to that, I think folks should know that you're playing hurt, but you're here.
Oh yeah, I'm waiting for people looking at the camera. Yeah, I managed to fracture my wrist playing football, which I guess kind of means more TV watching time.
Well, that's a good way to look at it. I'm sorry you fractured your wrist, but I think you deserve recognition that you're still plodding on with all of your.
Got to carry on. There's too much going on to be decommissioned.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so where do you want to start? Because I know you had a lot of strong feelings about some of the things going on, as I do. Where do we start this month?
I think we have to start on the roof of Apple Park, don't we?
I think that's a great place to start.
I mean, look, I'm going to embarrass you now, Chuck. How many years have you been watching WWDC keynotes for?
A long time. I would not want to quantify it, nor could I. But it's been a long time.
Yeah. This one basically started with Apple TV Plus,
which I found very interesting and exciting.
Very interesting.
I think it gives us a lot of different messages about just how important Apple TV Plus is in Apple's ecosystem now.
Yeah, I entirely agree. Now, I don't want to overstate it. It's not like we've never seen big moments for TV Plus in, big Apple keynotes, even at the front of Apple keynotes. I can remember a few times that we've seen this kind of thing, or trailers being announced mid-show. But WWDC, that's not even the target audience, is it? It's not like when you're trying to tell people about the new iPhone and then you're going to shove in the show that they're going to get for free when they buy the new iPhone. This is for developers, right? And they're still putting TV Plus right at the front.
There have been dubs where we saw some things that were more consumer oriented.
Sure,
but
and that has changed over the years, hasn't it?
That has evolved. There's no question about it. But your point is well taken. That even with that past history, if you think about what we saw this time, some of it could be seen as consumer facing, but most of it really was developer facing. Even if it was from the standpoint of this is what we're going to give you that you'll be able to then create with.
Yeah, right. It's just, I find it extraordinary that, because there's been a temptation to kind of think that TV Plus is a bit of a silly side project, right? That they do, and it's a nice way for Tim Cook to go to some nice gala dinners or whatever. But putting it in WWDC, to me, kind of indicates they really are taking it seriously.
I don't think there's any question they're taking it seriously.
I think there has been a question.
Oh, I think there's been a question. I mean, how many times have you and I talked about the importance that I don't always appreciate, but you do, of winning all the awards that they have won,
right? Or
even being nominated for those awards is a really big deal. One slide I wanted to call attention to that sort of, in fact, I had to go back and find it in the keynote video, was Tim had a highest rated original programs up there. And for 21, 22, and 23, Apple TV Plus was at the top, followed by Hulu, Peacock, Disney, et cetera, et cetera. The question I have, and I haven't seen it yet online, as to where that came from. I don't, but I don't. But I don't think Apple, it's not Apple's style to blow their own horn without having some backup. So somewhere, just the fact that they were even mentioned in the top 3, let alone being number 1 for 3 years running, really is indicative of how important Apple TV Plus is.
Sure, there's obviously perhaps a bit of a Ted Lasso effect there if you think of the years you're talking about. And also, it brings us back to the thing we always focus on with Apple TV Plus, right, which is the quality, not quantity thing. And actually, if you look at a lot of the research and discussion going around in the streaming world at the moment, a lot of it is talking about quantity and kind of mid-level shows that have mass appeal. And Apple has kind of quite rigidly stuck with its quality, not quantity approach.
And just very subtly, I mean, if there's one place that Apple TV Plus has fallen down, or Apple has fallen down with Apple TV Plus, is the promotion of some of these things. Because you're watching a show right now that was completely under my radar, and I have no idea about it, so I need to find out about it from you. And then there's another one we're going to talk about that also seems to be flying under the radar, and yet, somehow people are finding out about these things.
Yeah, I mean, we'll come to that because it's a good point. But just on this WWDC element, do you think we're having a shift in tone? Like, is this now as important to Apple as, I can't say the iPhone, right? But is it as important to Apple as it is its key ecosystems, its key operating systems, now that it's putting it right in front of this? Like, for people who watch us I guess people particularly watching on your channel don't need the importance of WWDC explained to them. But for others, this is so central to Apple's calendar, right, WWDC? And for them to be having TV stuff as part of it, when really it's about the nuts and bolts of their operating systems, I was really struck by it.
I agree completely. And it's, unfortunately or fortunately, there's really not a lot that developers can do with Apple TV Plus. And so as a result, why did
it's not like
we
we heard any major updates to tvOS, and lots of people would love some big updates to tvOS.
But there was one that, now I can't recall what they called it, but
right, there you go, point proven.
Well, but I've seen it written up a number of times over the last few days, and we're recording this 3 days, I guess, after the keynote, where it's one of those features that apparently a lot of people like. It tells you who's in the show that you're watching, what they've been in before, that kind of thing. I'm not.
So Apple had discovered IMDb. Cool.
Look, I don't care. They've added a feature, and it seems to be a popular one. So
sure.
the sense I have is Apple's listening to some of the criticisms, implementing things where they think it makes sense, especially in their world.
But because tvOS is often criticized, right? I mean, look, there are a lot of bad streaming UIs out there. There are a lot of bad streaming apps out there. Apple TV, sorry, I always feel is not quite as good as it should be. I'll give you an example. You know that I quite enjoy the baseball. I like Apple having Friday night baseball. It's not immediately obvious where you go within the TV app to watch the game. Like, it's still a bit of a clunky app. And we've had another WWDC where they haven't overhauled it.
But I'm going to go back to what you started that little piece of commentary with. I have yet to run into a streaming app that I think has a really great interface.
Oh, no, they're mostly horrible.
Yeah, I learned to work around them to find what I want. But I still think, oh boy, this could be so much better if they would just stop. They're always trying to push things at you. They're trying to force you to discover things.
Which Netflix does to great effect. I have to tell you, one of the best streaming apps, and it goes completely sort of uncommented upon because we're so used to it now here in the UK, is the BBC iPlayer, which really is, when you compare to a lot of the others and compared to its direct rivals here in the UK, really an exceptionally well put together piece of software.
And I have no experience with that, and I'm sure at least a few of our listeners are not going to be familiar with it. Can you give us an idea of why you feel that way and what's so great about it?
It just does the job it's meant to do. You can see where the live TV stuff is. You can see where the shows you want to watch are. It's a very good search function. Like, it just actually works as we would like most streaming services to do. It's a very, very well put together service. And And yeah, I think it's really impressive. And when we look at like the TV app, there are still too many barriers, I think, to finding the content you want. And yes, it's all well and good them putting it front and center at WWDC, but they do, I think, need to fix some of the fundamentals as well. I'm being a bit harsh. It's not so terrible, the TV app, but I think you understand the point I'm making.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's getting better. I mean, with each iteration, It seems like it. Just back to the iPlayer, because I'm really curious now. How do they handle discovery, or how do they handle pushing things to you? Since you say it's well organized to find what you want, but
there's a bit of that. All the key BBC shows are there. You could, there's a search function that actually works pretty well. Remember, it's also the way to watch things live. You can watch all of the BBC channels live as well. So there's a nice way to do that. Like I say, it's a search function that kind of works pretty well. Obviously, there's shows front and center that they want. It just does. It works as good as most kind of streaming services should. I've just put it up now. The shows that are there's a whole load of shows that it's pushing. It's pushing the new Doctor Who, the new Rebus, and so on. There's some trending shows. It has a totally dedicated live streaming channel for the general election going on here. There's some, there's collections of films you can find, and then there's obviously the shows you're watching, a continue function. It's just like, does the things it's meant to do and works well. It's much less clunky than a lot of the other streaming services I use.
Good to know. Well, then, Apple, take a look at the BBC iPhone.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe we don't want to go too deep down into this, but the problem the Apple TV app has, I think, is it's trying to be two things at once, right? It's trying to be the home of its own streaming service, and it's also trying to play nice and be the hub for content from a load of other streaming services.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Because that's what Apple ultimately wants, right? It wants all your subscriptions to streaming services through the TV app and I guess your Apple TV box. It wants, I'm pretty sure I see my Paramount Plus content in the TV app, and that makes it a bit messier, right?
Yeah, but I see the same thing in other streaming apps. I'm thinking of Amazon's right now.
Channel with the channels, yes, you're right.
Yeah, with the so Peacock shows up, Paramount Plus shows up, as tiles that I can go to, and then of course I have access to all that content. So it's a tough thing because the only streaming people that really stream their own stuff are, at least that I can think of at the moment, are the networks. Right. Here in the U.S. So if I go to NBC, ABC, or CBS, yes, I've got all kind of things that they're pushing, not just their news and sports, but their original programming, such as it is. But everybody else that's making these boxes, Apple TV Plus, Amazon, Roku, Chromecast, or Chrome, they're all trying to gather up everything so that you have everything in one spot. And that's a challenge.
And they want to be that spot. That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
I mean, that is indisputably correct. I'm browsing through, there's a huge Pride collection for Pride Month here on TV app, which is got some of their content. And also, I think, lots of other stuff not from Apple. Yeah, that you can rent and buy. So, it's doing two things at once, which I think can be a bit messy. But I think your comparison with Amazon is well made, because that's much more what it's like, and it's got, it does have channels as well. The same, again, as you say, the same as TV Plus, as Amazon Prime Video.
Yeah, what's actually ironic about it is that I can.
Here,
yeah,
I'm going to share a rant with you if you don't mind.
Oh, please! I love it when you rant.
Thank you. Right. Paramount Plus. I have a subscription to Paramount Plus that I pay. So I managed to get a deal for $69.99 or at $6.99 a month. I paid for it directly through Paramount. That means I cannot connect it to my Apple TV app, which is kind of annoying. I would happily do that. I have to, have a separate app, have it, on a different and I can't put it onto my computer or my PlayStation. Sorry, my TV or my PlayStation. So I have to plug in a laptop to watch Paramount Plus on my TV. Whereas I would like to just watch it through the TV app. But you can't connect the two accounts.
You can't connect the accounts, but can't you launch a Paramount Plus app on Apple TV and then
yes, but you can't. But it won't know my login. It doesn't know that I have an account. I would either have to get a less good deal or pay twice.
That doesn't sound right. You sure you can't log in with your existing account?
I am sure. I have tried.
Wow.
If any listeners or viewers have found a way to do it, please tell me why I'm wrong. I would love that to be the case, but I have not found a solution to this.
Huh. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it too, because I subscribe to a couple of the pays, but I also subscribe to some of the free with advertising services like Pluto TV. And I have no trouble using my login on multiple devices, including.
Well, I'm going to try again, but it is something of a frustration. But I obviously use the TV app on the PlayStation to use to watch Apple TV Plus.
Right. Yeah. Interesting.
And what I'm watching, actually, listen, I'll do a little segue because I am watching TV Plus shows at the moment, and one I'm really enjoying. This is not one for you, Chuck, is Loot. It's a 30-minute comedy starring Maya Rudolph as Molly Wells, who gets divorced. This is the first episode. This is no spoiler. She gets divorced from her billionaire husband, John Novak, who's played by Adam Scott, and then gets involved as a philanthropist. And this is the story as it develops. I've nearly finished season 1. I am really enjoying this, I have to tell you. It's really fun. It's not the most subtle or clever show ever. Like, you can see where it's going pretty early on. But it's really fun. I'm really enjoying it. Maya Rudolph is great. Actually, most of the cast is great. And yeah, it's really fun. And it shows to me again, how many times have I said this to you, Chuck? When Apple does these 30-minute comedies to kind of chill out the tone on TV Plus, they have tended to be pretty good. And
it feels like Apple is trying to go back to maybe a time when we had. I'm sorry for if anybody disagrees, but better comedies that weren't just, constant one-liners, as so much of it seems to be right now, that there are plots and there are comedic plots that really work.
Yeah. I mean, I thought with Ted Lasso, it took itself a bit too seriously by the end, but I love Mythic Quest. Can't wait for more Mythic Quest. I say it every time on the show because if I keep saying it out loud, maybe we'll get more Mythic Quest. I really enjoyed Shrinking, which I know you weren't a fan of, but I thought was really good. And I'm really enjoying Loot. What I like, this has just occurred to me as you were saying about better comedies. And what occurs to me is when Apple does comedies, they don't do that sort of by the numbers, 4 friends in an apartment, like The Big Bang Theory, like Friends itself. Sex in the City, Seinfeld, Will and Grace, those core group. There's obviously a core cast, as there has to be, but it's they're slightly differently formatted, and I rather like that.
And I want to correct something you said. I did not like Shrinking. It took me a while to get into it.
Oh, didn't you? I thought you weren't a fan.
But no, it took me a while to get into it, but eventually I got there. And to circle this back to Dub Dub for a second, as part of the little sizzle reel that they did, a new season of Shrinking is coming. I did not know that. So I was like, wow, okay, that's good. And then
you going to watch it?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, well, hey, I'm glad I won you over, or the show won you over. I don't know which one it was.
Well, Charlotte, we're kind of bouncing topics here, but exactly what you said about, that yes, there always have to be a core set of characters for any TV show, but it wasn't just constantly trading, things that then somebody could put a laugh track to if there was no live audience. They are situational comedies where the situations are the funny thing, not necessarily just the smart writers, trying to get something that is cute. And that speaks to me, again, as far as the quality of Apple TV Plus and what they're trying to produce.
Watching Luke, it really reiterated to me that Apple does these kind of shows now really well. It is now getting a collection of pretty decent comedies that would happily have been aired on other, mainstream channels, and are really well put together, beautifully shot, but like very uplifting, plenty of funny moments. Like, I think Apple is starting to do comedy really, really well. You and I have talked about how Apple seems to try to specialize to some extent in sci-fi, and it does that well. And I think slowly but surely the 30-minute comedy, it's recovering that as well.
Well, and kids programming too. I mean, you brought up pre-show that we have a new season of Snoopy coming along.
Yes, coming out Friday the 14th.
So, there you go. I mean, it's quality, and they also don't seem to be afraid to drop things that maybe aren't working. Now, how do you
define? It's been quite brutal.
Yeah. Now, how do you define not working? I'm not smart enough to know what's going on behind the scenes, but somewhere the things aren't working out. The viewership is not working out. They don't even see it as worth continuing to try to bump up syndication rights, if that ever is going to happen with Apple TV Plus. So a lot of mechanics going on here, but I feel like there's, again, to say it, there's just a huge focus on quality and things that do work for the audience.
Yeah, and we can only imagine the kind of data they're getting back. There was a movie you were watching that you wanted to talk about.
Are we talking about the one that we said we were going to talk about?
Yeah, I don't.
Okay.
You're trying to be kind and not spoil it for me, but go on. Tell us why you liked Argyle.
I didn't necessarily say that I liked it. It was a great one-watch movie, but I don't see myself going back and rewatching it. That said, there were a few places that it just jumped over the edge. I mean, it was an interesting premise, and okay.
Tell us the premise. Don't do spoilers.
Well, boy, that's tough. Oh, okay. So it involves a writer who creates this secret agent character called Argyle. And it turns out that Argyle is a real secret agent, and that she gets caught up in it and, in some of his adventures and how and why. And there are several plot twists along the way that are really well done. The effects are over the top, which again can be fun. So what could have started out as maybe a James Bond kind of thing, or even a Tom Cruise kind of thing, quickly jumps over into almost an over the top, I'm not ready to say comedy, but with comic elements that, again, great movie to sit down and watch once. I don't see myself revisiting it, but I definitely would tell you, give it a shot and see what you think.
A fun Saturday night chill out movie, nothing too serious.
Yeah, that's well said. That's well said. You might think you're getting into something that's a little more serious, and maybe that's just my bias, because if I think back to the beginning, I guess some of it right out of the gate is over the top, and that should have been a clue that I wasn't getting into a serious movie.
You see, you're actually selling it to me more. I quite like a bit of silliness and a bit of over the top.
Oh, then this is going to be for you. You're going to love it.
Yeah, I like a bit of silly. What was that? I can't remember what it was. The one with like The Rock and Angelina Jolie and Ryan Reynolds that was completely silly and ridiculous. They put out over Christmas one year on Netflix. I'm happy to have there's too much serious going on in life. I'm very happy for a silly action movie. No, if anything, I'm pro silly action. I'm very pro silly action shows, actually, which is something that actually, not to go, just to circle back to what we were saying earlier about the kind of quality, not quantity element of TV Plus. It doesn't do kind of silly action, does it? Apple TV Plus. It's kind of forgone all of that kind of thing.
Yeah, probably so. I'd have to go back and look at a roster. But right off the top, I can't think of silly action.
The kind of, anyway. One I'm really looking forward to, I don't think this is silly, but it is a thriller, is Presumed Innocent. It's an 8-episode limited series starring and produced by Jake Gyllenhaal. It's based on a book from it's a best-selling novel, the same name, by Scott Turow. So that's going to be fine. There's a big ensemble cast: Ruth Negga, Bill Camp, Elizabeth Marvel, Peter Sarsgaard, O.T. Fangbeni, and Renette Rensby. Big cast. It's out, just came out actually the day before we were recording this show, June the 12th. Now, both of us said we hadn't really realised this was coming. And it got a plug again back to WWDC, didn't it?
It did, along with a lot of other shows that are coming. And I have to say that I went back and watched that part of the keynote a couple times because I wanted to make sure that I sort of had some of those shows in my head. And The Presumed Innocent was one that, that caught my attention. And yet up to this
I'm
point,
I hadn't down to it.
Yeah, I had not known about it. So I'll be anxious to see what you say if I haven't gotten to it. Excuse me, what you say if I haven't gotten to it by the time we next talk.
Yeah, I guess we will have to discuss it next time. And I'd be interested actually to hear from viewers and listeners what stuff in that sizzle reel really stood out to them. What shows over the summer are they looking forward to settling down and watching? I mean, there is so much now. I don't know, just to bounce around again. Do you ever feel in general with streaming, we kind of have almost too much? Do you know what I mean? I'm often overwhelmed with what the choice is, and Apple isn't making my life that much easier.
Yes, I agree completely, Charlotte. I have a watch list that's as long as my arm because I don't spend a lot of time watching TV, and yet I see things like Presumed Innocent that are indeed compelling. And so, it's a wealth. It's an embarrassment of riches right now.
I know. There's another thing I'm really fascinated by. I didn't warn you about this, but it jumped up at me, and I was absolutely intrigued by it. And I'm glad you mentioned also Apple's pawn shop for doing pretty good kids programming, because I noticed there's more Frog and Toad over there, which I am sure I remember the books from my childhood. And there was an original trailer back in kind of April 2023, and there's more of it now on Apple TV Plus. And I was rather struck when I saw that it's kind of not Apple original IP, a bit like Snoopy, but kind of the thing that will make TV Plus much more useful for families as a subscription, which I guess is where the money is now when people are really thinking about how many of these services they can afford.
I think it's a skill we're all going to have to develop if we don't want to just mortgage our homes.
I'm never going to develop the skill. I can't even tell you the number of services I subscribe to. It's shameful.
Well, that's it. I think you need to pick and choose and see, when a really good deal comes out for something that you feel like delivers a lot of value, by all means do it. I think you have, but the other thing that has to go into the equation, and I know we've talked about it before, is how much time do you really spend consuming the content?
Right. Well, this is something that I'm so pleased you said this. Is it because what we talk about is budgeting money? We forget that time is a budget too.
It's a more limited budget than money in a lot of cases.
And so, but I think that's what Apple TV Plus does well, actually. Because it doesn't make endless shows, it is very targeted how much of its time you want to take up, actually. It wants to take up, actually. So we've just mentioned that new Jake Gyllenhaal. 8-episode limited series. Bang. Done. There was one movie you wanted to watch, 2.25 hours or something, isn't it? Done. Like, you can budget that time. It's not like turning on Netflix where you think the whole of television is there.
Agreed. And it's just, if you don't, you could spend your entire wrist injury recovery watching TV trying to catch up. And that's not going to be good for your wrist or for anything else. So,
look, saying this, as ever, I always have the list of Apple originals up as we're talking. And there's just so much now.
I'll tell you two that are on my watch list because I wanted to pull them up and make sure. And I have not seen either one of these, so I can't advocate for them, but they have my attention. Franklin, about the documentary or a show about Benjamin Franklin, and Manhunt about the search for Abraham Lincoln's killer.
There's a theme there. I'm noticing a theme, Chuck.
What's that?
American presidents, American history.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, I brought them up only because they are coming up on my watch list. So, but the fact that they are there and they have not received a huge amount of publicity, so I can't say how well they've been received, but they were subjects that, caught my attention. So there's so much stuff in Apple TV, and we've talked about, in fact, I think some of our earliest shows, we specifically mentioned a number of shows that went way under the radar, maybe were intended, as you said, as limited series, and therefore we weren't expecting them to come back. And I think that's maybe an interesting way to do it now with so much competition, that you're not asking someone to commit to a 22, 23 episode season. You're asking for an 8-episode commitment or 6-episode commitment. And at first I wasn't sure I'd like it. I now think it's a great way for the production teams to combat this thing, because then we can all move on to other things, come back to the ones that work for us and for the people that produce them. Yeah,
I'm inclined to agree. And the other one on my watch list, which I know neither of us have watched yet, is Palm Royal, which I think has received some quite good reviews. So I'm looking forward to getting stuck into that as well. I mean, I do have a big problem though, Chuck, which is there is so much sport on this summer. We've got the European football here, and you've got the Copa America over there in the US. We've both got the Olympics. It's the US Open golf this weekend. There's obviously Wimbledon. I mean, there's just so much, Chuck. How are we going to manage this?
We're going to have to get better at multitasking, Charlotte.
Multitasking. Hey, we were talking about time budget, and I think that's rather proved it.
That's it. You have to be able to absorb some things that maybe aren't so intense while you're actually accomplishing other things like cleaning the house or doing the laundry or whatever. So
3 games a day at the beginning of the Euros, Chuck. How am I going to do this?
I can't help you with that because I'm going to be watching the U.S. Open. So
you're going to be spending the whole weekend in front of the U.S. Open golf, exactly.
Yeah. Well,
I
will be getting on the golf course as well, but definitely watching the U.S. Open together. So yeah.
Well, I look forward to hearing how you definitely beat Scotty Schebler's score, and I'll look forward to hearing about it all.
The only way I'm going to beat Scotty Scheffler's score is if I don't count about half my shots.
As if he doesn't play.
As if he doesn't play. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
All right. Well, it looks like we have a lot to be cracking on with for the few weeks ahead until we return for more TV Plus talk.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But folks, answer some of our questions. We'll give you our contact information in a minute. We'd love to hear what is exciting you and what you think about what we're thinking about what is on Apple TV Plus. Do you see strengths? Do you see weaknesses? Are there things that you'd like to see on Apple TV Plus or see them do? Not that we can do anything about it, but we'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, and definitely, obviously, across our social media and also in the YouTube comments on both of our channels, we'd love to hear from you.
Definitely. So, Charlotte, where can folks make that connection with you?
So I'm at Charlotte A. Henry across social media. I blog, post podcasts and newsletters at theedition.net. Or if you want to sign up to my newsletter directly, head to newsletter.theedition.net. Great.
You can find me as @ChuckJoyner on pretty much all the major social medias and a few of the minor ones as well. And you can see everything else that I do on MacVoices at MacVoices.com. Right now, we're on the road to MacStock, which is a Mac and Apple-oriented conference in Crystal Lake, Illinois in July. We'd love to have you join us. Charlotte, we'll see you next month.
See you next month. Got lots of TV to watch.
Oh, boy. Thanks for watching us. Thank you. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you MacVoices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.